that's a really good. It's like, why does it matter? You know, I don't have an answer to that. But no, that's a good question to consider.
I thought it was interesting how their reactions were so different between the boys and the girl. How she immediately started weeping, and they didn't really explain the reactions of the men other than seeing the thoughts and stuff.
It seems like her not recognizing him was like her doubt, like he kept saying like the temple, like tear down and build up in 3 days, but like she thought someone had taken him, like is that like her doubt or?
I mean, I don't think I can like say. But yeah, I mean, what I find interesting is that it happens over and over again. Is that it's not just her. Like this is a pattern of people thinking Jesus was a stranger and then being like, oh wait, it's you. You know, it's strange.
Well, it said that he hid himself from people he was walking towards Jerusalem. I can't remember their names, but they were
They don't have names. On the road to Emmaus?
I thought they mentioned it. But yeah, it said he hid himself.
Yeah. I was just reading in like the later chapters of 1 Corinthians just yesterday that talks about the difference between our physical body and our spiritual body, and that there are differences, but will be recognizable. Anyway, so if this stuff's really interesting to you, go read the last few chapters of 1 Corinthians. You'll find it, and it talks about this more. All right. Anything else that got your attention? You found it interesting or memorable? Gardner. Isn't it fun? I grew up in Christian schools like many of you have, and there is this point where we've read scripture, or especially if you've grown up in church or whatever, that you've heard the story so many times that you don't really hear it. Okay, the Bible is funny. The Bible is really funny if you can freshen up your ears enough to hear it. There's some really funny moments. But anyway. All right, I'm going to sort of go verse by verse for parts of this. We are going to skip a chunk in the middle. And so let's go back. Verse 1 says, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early while it was still dark and thought that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. This is Jerusalem. This is 2,000 years ago. What's Jerusalem like in this era? Like in general, who's ultimately in political control of Jerusalem? Rome, right? What's the relationship between Rome and the Jewish population? Not so great. Now let's think about like the 2 or 3 days leading up to this. Okay? What happened on Friday afternoon that the whole community would have noticed? Okay, so they wouldn't have all noticed the crucifixion. Okay, there was an earthquake. What else? There was darkness in the middle of the day. Okay, seriously. If there was a massive earthquake and then the sun went out for a few hours in the afternoon, wouldn't everyone just be completely terrified, right? You've got a community that has to be a little off. So now imagine, we'll come back to it. Now imagine walking up to your mom and Mom, I'm going to go to like the worst part of a major city. I'm going to go to the worst part of LA, I'm going to go to the worst part of New York, I'm going to go to the worst part of Chicago, the worst part of San Francisco. I'm going to like go and like take a walk around 4 in the morning with like maybe a couple maybe 2 other friends. So we're just going to go like walk through the city. Worst part of the city is 4 in the morning. How's your mom going to take that?
Yeah.
Not well, right? Right? Because especially, judging from the other Gospels, it's likely that in this moment that Mary was probably with 2 or 3 other friends, all women. It is not necessarily wise for 3 or 4 women to go walking through a dangerous city at 4 in the morning. Mary risked a lot just by doing this. Just in the first little bit of this chapter, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early while it was still dark. Okay, it's probably between 3 and 6 in the morning. That's a big deal. She risked her physical safety. So why does she go? She thinks Jesus is dead, right? So it says that they are going to do the burial rites, to honor him, to take care of his body the way you would take care of someone who you honor and you love. There's another piece of this that you rewind in the story. When Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, what are the people doing at the tomb, at Lazarus' tomb? They're weeping, okay? Which, have any of you ever watched international news, like when there is trauma in the Middle East? How do Middle Eastern people grieve culturally? It's loudly, wailing, loud, like pulling hair. Like, it's a cultural thing, right? And for mainstream American culture, we think it's unusual, but it's probably at the lightest level. But it's a cultural thing. It's just, it is expected that if you love someone or you honor someone, you are going to wail and grieve and cry out. And, people would pull out, rip their hair or rip their clothes. Just, it's a very physical form of grieving. And that is what was expected for 3 days after someone died. And so it's likely that they were planning on doing that too for Jesus at his tomb. It doesn't say it. It just says they were going to take care of his body with the herbs and the frankincense or whatever. But that was likely as well. Verse 2. Mary just sees that the stone is rolled away. Okay, she doesn't look in. She just sees the stone is rolled away. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." So I told Mr. Maitland that I was going to be talking about this chapter, these verses. And I said, "Do you have a resource I could read just to get somebody else's viewpoint on these passages?" And then he goes, "Sure." I said, "Could you just put it in my mailbox in the staff lounge?" Yeah, no. I walked into my classroom the next day, and there's a stack of commentaries this tall on my desk. I was oh, okay. So, but I did. I read them all. And one of them, probably couldn't even tell you which one at this point, one of them brought up something I hadn't thought about. Okay, think of it relationally, think of it in terms of friends and things like that. Why is it surprising that Mary ran to Peter? Put it together?
Isn't Peter really the aggressive one, or he doesn't like to listen very easily? He's not sensitive.
Okay, yes. There's something even more specific that has happened in the last few days.
He just denied Jesus.
Yeah. Peter just stood in the public square, essentially, and said, "I don't know Jesus. I've never known him. Don't associate with him." Peter has publicly cut ties with Jesus. Mary stood at the foot of the cross or nearby the cross and watched Jesus die. Mary ran to Peter and John. Now John was with Mary and Jesus' mother and some other women near the cross and watched Jesus died. So it's not surprising she went to John, but she got Peter. There's some forgiveness going on here, right? From what we can tell in the scriptures, some fairly unearned forgiveness. Because if someone, even a good friend, treated a friend you loved the way Peter treated Jesus, to me it would have been natural for the disciples, for Mary, for them to ostracize Peter, but they don't seem to have. And I see a willingness to forgive there that's actually pretty amazing. So thank you to the commentaries for that, because I hadn't figured that out. Okay, verses 3 through 10 we're gonna kind of jump over pretty fast because they're about Peter and John rather than about Mary. The men go off running and John gets there first, and I just love that John's writing this, and I just think it's a little humorous. He's like, "Yeah, I got there first." Yeah, Peter and I ran, I got there first. But I didn't go in. I got there first, but I didn't go in. Peter was after me. He didn't hesitate, he went straight in. And there's kind of a couple ways you could read this. About what exactly is the situation, why John was so committed to putting all those details in, but whatever, we're not talking about that today. But what is interesting to me is verse 10. Verse 10 says, then the disciples went back to their homes. And then verse 11 starts, but Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. We have no way of knowing the motivations or the reasoning why the dude ditched her, okay? We don't know. She may have asked. They may have said, hey, let us take you back to the city. She may have said, no, I want to stay here. I want to stay here and grieve. I want to stay here and figure out what happened to him. It says John seems to have understood that Jesus had risen. He seems to kind of have that in his head, but not quite know what to do with it yet. So we don't know why, but she's left alone, and the guys leave her there. But she came back. She was alone, and she was grieving. And can you imagine the emotions of this woman? She's watched Jesus die horrifically, and there's an earthquake, and the sky goes dark, and there's his body, and then she has to wait 24 hours through the Sabbath, and she can't take care of him, and she and the other women, and they want to do what they do. They want to provide for him the way they have been providing financially all the way through. And then she gets up at 4 in the morning and walks through Jerusalem with bazillions of soldiers and angry people around who are out to get Jesus' followers, right? And she has been publicly seen with him, and so she's going through the city at night, and then she gets there, the stone's gone, and then she goes, okay, by the way, this poor woman is back and forth, right? I just think she's weary and exhausted. I think I'm in the iron right now, and can't even be anywhere close. Mary stood weeping outside the tomb, and as she wept, she stooped to look in the tomb. She looked in the tomb again. She looks in the tomb. She sees 2 angels. And they say to her, woman, why are you weeping? I've always read that as a compassionate statement, oh, honey, what's wrong? That's how I've always read that. And then, again, back to the commentaries, there's another way of looking at that, though, which I did not come up with. I did not figure out. These angels know the story, right? They know that Jesus is raised from the dead, right? Imagine, on a very small scale, you have a niece or a nephew or a very younger sibling, and it's Christmas morning, and you're so excited to open your presents, and then this little person in your life is, crying about something, inconsequential. You say, hey, buddy, stop crying. It's Christmas, We're about to get presents. Okay, that's really big compared to these angels looking at Mary going, why are you weeping? This is the best day in all of human history. He's alive. Why are you crying? Why are you weeping? But, the angels and Mary just have such different perspectives at this point. But the other thing I find really interesting about 12 and 13 is what they don't say to us. What do angels almost always say?
Don't be afraid.
Do not be afraid, don't be scared. They don't say that to Mary. And they call it arguing from the negative, like trying to use something that isn't there to prove your point. That's really weak logic. Come to English language. So this is a little bit arguing from the negative, trying to draw conclusions from what's not there. But the fact that the angels don't say, do not be afraid, to me is very telling. I read into that and say, this woman is so beyond. She is so overwhelmed. She is so fraught. She is so upset or whatever. That she sees angels and she's like, whatever, I just get them. Why I don't have. There's nothing in me that can be afraid right now. Whatever, just leave it alone. So again, that's me reading into it. Don't take that as gospel. But I do find it very interesting that they don't say, do not be afraid. And she still says, will somebody tell me where Jesus' body is? Come on, I'm just trying to do my job. Just tell me where it is so I can honor him the way I need to. And having said this is verse 14. She turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Again, we've talked about this already some. This seems to be a pattern. And does Christ hide himself, or does he hide his identity, or is there something about a resurrection body that is different enough, or we don't really have the answer, but except that it seems to be a common situation. Jesus said to her, I'm actually skipping verse 15. He asked her another question in verse 15. But in verse 16, Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned and said to him in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. There's the verse that my sheep know my voice. And I think it is so touching, so appropriate, so much like Jesus, that the word that gets Mary's attention, the word that makes her understand who he is her name. When Jesus says her name, she recognizes him. She knows his voice. She knows what it sounds like for Jesus to say her voice. And this is kind of a side note, but I think it's really important, in that that's what I really desire for me, for myself, and that's what I really desire for you, is that you would be able to recognize Jesus' voice as he says your name. Because he is. He is saying your name. He is speaking to your heart. And my deep, deep desire is that you learn to know that voice, learn to recognize that voice, learn to recognize when he says your name. Like Mary. Mary knew Jesus' voice as he said her name. Okay, when I was your age, I predominantly read the NIV. Whatever, I did. And in the NIV, verse 17 goes something like, Jesus said to her, do not touch me, for I have not touched my father. And, that made me mad. I was like, God, that's wrong, okay? Jesus would never say that to her. Jesus would never say, don't touch me. Like, and I was just so angry about it. And because the NIV did a really terrible job of translating that. I'm just going to tell you right now. The ESV does a much better job. The ESV that I read to you says, do not cling to me. That's totally different than do not touch me. And you don't say do not cling to me unless someone is clinging to you, right? And so we get this idea that either Mary has recognized Jesus and thrown herself into his arms because she is so, there is no word, I think, to express how excited she is to see him. Or, in a different gospel, it talks about how Jesus later appears to the group of women who had been with Mary previously, but who she has been separated from, is most likely how that all works. And that when he appeared to them, they threw themselves at his feet and worshipped him. So maybe that's what Mary has done. Maybe she's holding on to his feet, like maybe she's just bowed down in front of him. But somehow she's clinging to him. And he says, do not cling to me. Again, back to the commentaries. I love the explanation I read in several of those, which is that Jesus is in transition. He's died, he's resurrected, he's still on earth, but he's headed to heaven. And this is a massive transition for Mary and the other disciples. In that until then, they had followed him around, right? Like sheep after their shepherd, and just literally physically followed him around, you know. And Jesus is saying, no, you don't get to hold on to me anymore. You don't get to physically follow me around anymore. Now you are going to go out yourselves, and I will send my Spirit with you. But no, you're not going to cling to me anymore. I'm going to go away, and I will send my Holy Spirit with you. You can't cling to me. And I hope that, because it's a kind of a fun feeling, but you've had, well, maybe, but little kids cling to you, maybe. If you've ever had a child who doesn't want to be put down, like that's the imagery I get in my head, where Jesus is like, okay, come on, okay, like, you can do this. Do not cling to me, we're moving on. We're changing how this works. That's what I have to say about this passage. And then I want to talk about how this connects to what we've been learning from Mr. Hassel. And it's pretty simple. By looking at this passage, time for interaction. what has Mary been willing to sacrifice? Actually sacrificed or been willing to sacrifice for Jesus so far?
Her physical body
Mm-hmm.
and time and money.
Yeah, so we have money. She's been financially supporting him for a long time. Definitely her time. She's put herself in physical risk. What else?
Does she have a job? Or kind of like a...
She had
Where
money.
she got her money.
Yeah, so she's been following Jesus, which means she hasn't been doing whatever she used to do. Okay? Whatever that was. She's given up her past in some way or another, or you know, which might mean old relationships, something like that.
Her reputation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, she's put her reputation on the line. Lost it in a lot of people's eyes. What else has she paid down or been willing to pay down? Absolutely. Yeah.
She never had kids or anything.
We have no idea. We have no idea. But she's, like I said, she has walked away from her old life to some extent. We don't know. And we don't know exactly. We don't know what exactly she's walked away from. What did she have to pay down in order to be in a relationship with Peter again? Have a interaction with Peter again?
Her mental, human nature.
Yeah.
She had
Pride, human nature, anger, right? She didn't punch him in the, we have no reason to think she punched him in the face, which she may have wanted to do at some point. Or, excuse me, I have no idea what Mary wanted to do. I would have wanted to do. She laid down she risked her safety, she laid down her pride. She paid an emotional price, right? I think we've seen that pretty clearly, that, you know, that's a price we pay. Emotions cost us something. Mm-hmm.
She had to wake up really early.
Seriously! Come on! Get up in the morning. Yes.
I think it is. It is like alarm clocks. Like inside time. I think she's
I know, that's what he just asked. Magic, I don't know. You can train yourself. Train a rooster. Oh wait, I have to tell you a story, but I don't have time to tell it. Okay. I'll tell you. All right. I also think another cost, the price she paid, has something to do with obedience. Like she was obedient. Like Jesus says, okay, you know, she's clinging to Jesus, and he's like, okay, let go and go tell everybody that what's happened. All right? Can't you just say, no, I want to stay with you. No, come, we'll go together. We'll come walk with me. No, she obeyed. She said, she left. She obeyed. That's a price. That's a price.
I like that she, no matter what situation, she's always a disciple. Like, she's complete disciple. She never, like, left Jesus.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm going to read you the last couple sentences of my notes, because that's how much time I have left. What gets my attention as I read through this passage is not that Mary did these things, but why she did them. She paid in every way she could, not out of guilt or requirement or in order to get some kind of reward or to make it into heaven, but because she loved Jesus. It seems that none of her payments felt like hardships in light of her relationship with Christ. I'd like to propose that Mary should stand as an ideal for us to emulate. We aren't failures if sometimes making the decision to sacrifice for Christ is difficult. All right? Like, hear me. If you make a decision for Christ, but it takes a lot out of you, and you're really, really tempted to do something else, that's okay. Like, that doesn't, the fact that it's hard, that's okay. That doesn't, we aren't lesser if our emotions aren't always in line with our intentions. Okay? Mary was very emotional in this situation, and she loved Jesus, and she obeyed Jesus out of this incredible joy. you know, we're not always going to feel that incredible joy. We're not always going to be on that like mountaintop moment that Mary's having right here. Sometimes obedience is just going to be obedience, and it's not going to feel awesome like this did for her. And that's okay. However, Mary shows us that when we love Jesus and are abiding in His love for us, giving Him all we are and have becomes natural. I'm going to say that again. Mary shows us that when we love Jesus and are abiding in His love for us, giving Him all we are and have becomes natural. Counting the cost, paying it down, sacrificing, for Mary that was the natural thing to do because she loved Jesus and she knew that He loved her and she lived in that love, and so it was natural. And I think that's something we can learn from and something we can hope to move towards. Although, please, I think when I was your age, I felt like if I wasn't like always feeling awesome, that meant I was bad in some way. No, okay? Sometimes life's gonna suck. Sorry, but I like to look to Mary and come back to this passage to remind me of real life, of what reality is. Okay, so it is 11:58, and I am somewhere between 1 and 2 minutes. Oh no, 11:59. 1 minute! I finished 1 minute early. So, that.
Wow.